Alright, so in this last chapter about rendering and exporting, we're going to cover the basics of how to export your model to use in different programs and how to give yourself maybe just like a nice quick preview render in ZBrush, but something that's going to give you a better idea of how it looks with some lighting and some shadows and stuff like that. Now a review about exporting. Like I had stated in the first chapter about the difference between the exportation of your model itself and the exportation of a ZBrush document. Just remember those because you're going to want to pay attention to both of those in this case. But when you're exporting your model, just stick up here to the tool menu, and again I'll go over the common export formats. When you export, you have your few options here of Maya ASCII, OBJ, and the GoZ format, which we're not going to worry about because that has to do with the GoZ plugin. So go ahead and just keep it with OBJ. Again, it's the most universal format, so almost every program will accept that. And you can go ahead and just name it whatever you want and then click save, and that'll export the model itself. Okay. Now when you have multiple subtools, if you go ahead and go up here to export, just remember that it's going to only export the one you have selected. So if you wanted to keep the eyes with this guy and export him out for use to maybe retopologize him or something like that with the eyes intact and the mouth intact, you're just going to have to make sure that these are going to be merged together. And again, like I showed you before, you can do this a couple different ways. You can merge visible, or you can just merge down and make sure they're one. And then when they're one, you can just export and it'll all export as one mesh. Okay. And also keep in mind that when you're exporting him for use in a game engine or any other program for that matter, with your hardware in mind, make sure that you're using the right resolution for exporting. What I mean by this is obviously you can see here he's at 911,000 polygons, close to 1 million. If we tried to open this up in a real-time 3D viewer like Maya, or in a game engine like Marmoset or something, then it's either gonna do one or two things. It's going to take forever to load, or it's going to crash completely. There's just simply too many polygons here for it to compensate with most hardware configurations. Again, ZBrush has a way of displaying this really high resolution without taxing your hardware as much as those other programs would if you were trying to display the same thing. So just keep that in mind, because when you export, you're going to want to export at a resolution that your hardware can handle in the other programs. Using a baking program or something, or a program with baking functionality like Topogun, for instance, is it has a way to display this without really super taxing your hardware, because it treats it as a reference mesh and not as the actual mesh that you're manipulating or anything. So it treats it a little differently, allowing it the ability to display it properly. But in any case, if you're going to export this guy, for instance, for retopology or something, sometimes it could be just a little bit too high, and that can be an issue because your hardware is not really going to be able to handle it that well. So you're going to be sitting here, you're going to be drawing the new topology over the reference mesh, and it's just going to be going super slow because it's trying to find the points or something to stick to, and it's just not really going to work all that great. So you can do this a couple different ways. The easiest, most straightforward way is to just drop it a few subdivision levels and export it at that subdivision level. In some cases, though, when you drop a subdivision level, like you can see with the horns up here, it's going to lose lots of the detail. And those horns are no longer sticking out here or anything, so that could be less than ideal in a lot of circumstances. But if we wanted to, say, bring him down and keep our geometry in kind of the places that it is without messing too much with it, what we can do is use a nice little plugin that they created called Decimation Master. It's under the Z plugin menu up here, and you go under Decimation Master, open that up, and you'll have all these options right here. Pretty easy to decipher actually, but make sure you have freeze borders and keep UVs on. This is just going to make sure your UV maps stay intact, because if you don't have these on during decimation, your UV maps will get destroyed. So first thing you're going to want to do is look past this really fast and look down here. This is going to tell you how much decimation that you want done to the mesh. And this is basically saying how much you're going to be reducing the mesh, the resolution of the mesh, so that it's at a manageable quality. And we can go ahead and just do something like 20%, which is the default. It's not that big of a deal. So once you have that set, go back up here and you can pre-process all your subtools, or you can pre-process the current selected one. So we're just going to pre-process the current selected one. You hit pre-process and let it do its thing here. Now this part could take a second because it's analyzing the mesh, and if it's a lot higher resolution, then it's going to take a lot longer. The more polygons it is, the longer it takes basically. So we'll give this a minute here actually. Okay, now that we've pre-processed it, we can just go back up here to Z plugin. And now after we've pre-processed it already, we can just click on Decimate Current. And you click this, and with it pre-configured already, it's not going to take as long as it did to pre-process it. And it's going to decimate it. And you can see, you might not notice right away, and that's a good thing actually. Right now, it's no longer at 911,000 polygons. It's now at 363,000 polygons. But you can see that using this tool, we were able to retain a lot of the detail with a third of the polygons, which is a great thing, especially in production purposes. When you need to export this model for use in a movie or a game or anything like that, you want it to be able to render the fastest and not drag anybody back in production. So optimization is king in that regard. So that's a great tool to use for instances like that. It's Decimation Master. Okay. So moving on now from exporting, we're going to do a quick overview about rendering your object. And this can actually give you a nice little preview or something of what your object might look like in a certain lighting situation or something like that. But anyway, after we position it how we like, and you can do this throughout the process too, creating your character or whatever. You can do this throughout the process. You can just we'll just position them how we like, and a really quick way is to just click the BPR up here, which I showed you before. BPR meaning best preview render. Click that, give it a minute to work. There we go. Okay, not much of a difference, but if you look close enough, you'll see we now have softer, more defined edges, and we also have shadows projected onto it. So it gives a little bit better of a quality for previewing purposes. You click off of it, all our shadows disappear. We're back to our fast preview mode. Okay. Now up here at the render menu, you open this up and you have a breadth of options to play with for rendering. Honestly, the possibilities are endless with rendering. Especially in the new version of ZBrush, you can use environment mapping, you can use HDRI images, all kinds of stuff. Subsurface scattering, ambient occlusion, all this crazy stuff to get the most craziest renders you can think of. Tons of documentation on this already. So I'm just going to show you the basic features of it. If you open your render properties window, you're going to see all the attributes that you have available to you for previewing in your render. You can turn on subsurface scattering, which is a way for the skin to show its subdermal layers and the like, and it'll give it a more skin-like look. You also have ambient occlusion, which is going to project the shadows into all the little nooks and crannies of the details of your mesh and give you a more realistic shadowing. And you also have these other smaller options like wax preview and view blur, which just affect how the render looks and how the material looks. So with this on, we'll just leave these ones on since they're the most obvious ones. You can go up here and click on Best Renderer. Now just keep in mind too, when you do this, it's going to take a minute because this is a little different than BPR. This is going to render your mesh with global illumination shadows, and you can see it working in the process right now. And it's going to rough out everything and put all the detail that you chose in there. It's going to look slightly different than your best preview render, which is just going to give you a fast preview of how it could look. But this is where most of your options come from with your rendering, is up in the render menu. And you can see we have a little bit more in-depth shadows around the detail in his face and the ocular area. The shadows are projecting realistically and whatnot. Well, obviously this isn't looking very good, and a big part of that is going to be your lighting. If you go up here to the light menu, open that up, by default you will have one light in your scene. This can be moved around, and obviously you can see it changing below the window right now. You can get some pretty dynamic lighting going on with this to give yourself an emotional presence in the scene, in the render. You can also add more lights, and by selecting between these two, you'll see it changes the placement, so you can place them all individually to get your different effects. So let's just put this as like a backlight here, and we'll use this as like a key light or something. Mess around with it, and then we'll just add another one in here and move it kind of down below here. And then what we'll do, we'll turn our backlight intensity down quite a bit, so we want that to be enough to just light the back of his head. We'll turn our key light intensity up. Actually, this was the key light right here. Turn the key light intensity up and turn the backlight off. Not off, but down. And then our directional third light here, we can just give it a subtle look. If you look under the color swatch right here, you can change different colors for each light that you have. Again, giving yourself a little bit more expression in the scene and the lighting. You can also use different things for your background. You can use an environment texture or something like that if you want to use that. It's not always going to look ideal unless it's formatted properly, but there are a lot of tutorials on how you can do that. So I'm not really going to show much about that right now. We'll just use our basic black background, our gradient background. And again, like your render menu here, you have tons and tons of options to play with. And I can honestly say a lot of these I've probably never touched on. And I'll just use the basic lighting, because that's what this is. This is the basics. So with that, we got some slightly more dynamic lighting going on right now. And if we position it properly, and we go back up here to render, and we click best render again, and let it work its magic. And you can see it's already slightly higher quality, and the lighting is a lot subtler, and it really pushes the expression in his face. Obviously nothing close to what a real pro could do with the lighting, because a lot of people even will just specialize in rendering techniques and lighting within programs like ZBrush, to where that's all they know. They know how to really light a scene, they really how to set things up. But this is just to give you an idea of a very small amount of the possibilities that you can have when working with your scene. As a game artist, you're not so much going to do this a lot in ZBrush, because most of your rendering is going to come straight out of the game engine that you're working in. So that's just kind of a disclaimer for you there. Here we go. Let's use a nuclear explosion. He's standing right next to the sun. And let that go ahead and work. I'm just trying to show you how the shadows react in the best render as opposed to the preview render. It can look quite a bit different. Okay, so anyway, that's pretty much all there is for rendering. Like I said, one more time, I just want to emphasize this. There are tons and tons and tons of different combinations of these attributes you can use to create some very amazing work. I myself, being a game artist, do not personally work within ZBrush as much in the rendering department as I do every other one. Most of my works come out of the game engine. So what I'm showing you here is just a basic look into some of the possibilities. But anyway, moving on, lastly, I want to show you how to go ahead and export this. So for one last time, we'll go ahead and use the best preview render and let it work and get something that we can export out of ZBrush as its own image. This can also be useful if you're going to create some art pieces with it, which is also something in ZBrush that a lot of people use rendering and lighting setup for. So now we have this rendered out. If you go up here to Document and you go to Export, you'll just export the image. You see here we have our few different formats. We have the PSD, we have a bitmap, and we have a TIFF format. You're going to just go ahead and export it to PSD because that way you can take it into Photoshop later, and just if you absolutely need to, you can convert it to whatever image format you like. These other image formats are more specialized and they're going to be used in programs that can support them. I mean, aside from bitmap, of course. Bitmap has been used since the dawn of time, but the idea stays the same. Just export it to PSD and take it into Photoshop, and you can manipulate it there. Now also I just wanted to show you real fast, I also explained this before I believe, that saving and exporting are two completely different things. If you save, you're just going to be saving the document, save the tool or whatever, save the document, okay? And when you go to save the document, you see the extension's different. There's no options here for image because it's not exporting an image. It's saving the ZBrush document. So it's going to open this picture back up if you were to go back and open this document from this extension. So if you see ZBR on your extension, you're doing the wrong thing. You need to cancel and hit export if your intention is to get an image of this out of ZBrush. Okay? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the series. I sincerely appreciate anybody who tuned in to learn a little bit more about starting with ZBrush. It's a very, very, very powerful program. If you really experiment a lot with it and all the things you can do within the possibilities of it, then you can really create some amazing, amazing work. And to give you an example of that amazing work, you can just go on ZBrush, Pixelogic's website, or ZBrush Central, and if you look through the galleries there are some pieces of art that'll really blow your mind. So just keep on trying at it. You'll get there eventually. And if you take all these tools and all these things you learn and just expand on them and build on the foundation, then you'll be able to create some amazing works yourself. So again, with that, I thank you for tuning in, and please check out the links below and check out my portfolio website and my other videos. And I'll see you next time.